Welcome to the True Texas Real Estate Podcast, where we're going to talk about buying and selling Texas. I'm your co-host, Marilee Brown with Empire Financial, and I'm going to introduce to you I got to get used to all these, which way is which, but in my screen, this is the great Linda Zimmerhansel of Zest Realty. Linda, say hi.
Hey there, everybody.
We are so excited that we have a fantastic guest today. Great guy, heard so much about him, actually did a loan for his daughter a couple of years ago. But I'm going to let Linda do the introduction because as a lender, Tracy, I don't want to see your inspection reports.
And, no, I understand that.
And Linda doesn't send them to me. I don't want to see them. So I'm going to sort of pretend that I am a consumer. And as a consumer, I'm going to ask questions, but I'm going to let Linda do the great introduction. And I'll probably ask Linda a couple questions because I'm sure there's a story in how she found you. But go ahead, Linda. Let's introduce Tracy.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Tracy Myers with a total home inspection. Fantastic. And I'm going to beat you to it, Marilee, because this is probably the best part of the podcast is how I met Tracy. 10 years ago, and he was referred to me by I think it was my broker at the time, right?
Yeah,
and
it sure was.
Donna, it was fantastic. And so I had a client that was trying to buy a foreclosure, and so I say, "Hey, Tracy, go do this." Well,
yeah, this is the one I'll never forget.
Tracy's there in front of the house, and I get there, and I'm like, "Hey, nice to meet you." And the house was, I want to say it was the worst house I've ever looked at, and it was smeared with dog feces from floor to ceiling, and the VA had foreclosed on it and tried to clean it, but not well. And Tracy told me, "What'd you tell me, Tracy?"
I'll say, "You have no idea how much danger you're in just standing here looking at this."
Yeah.
I said, we should be wearing Tyvek suits and respirators. And you were just like, "Well, could we just hire somebody to clean it up just a little bit?" I mean, you're so optimistic, Linda. Even when you first started, you're just a little bit less optimistic now than you were then, but I think in a good way.
Called realistic. Well, Tracy wouldn't do it. He refused to do the inspection.
Yeah. The worst way you could introduce each other was like that situation, but we've been friends ever
and
since.
look at us now.
Well, it must be however you handled it, Tracy, at work, because you are her guy. And Linda, I want to ask you a quick question because I really think there's a lot of real estate agents out there that are new in the business, or maybe they've been in the business for 100 years and have just lost their inspector. How do you go about finding a home inspector?
Well, first of all, I have to say I let my clients choose, but I recommend, right? It's very important to let them recommend. Some agents just give them a list of all the licensed inspectors. I like to recommend the ones that I know are honest, thorough, and experienced, and then can communicate well. That's extremely important. Okay. And there are a lot that don't fit those four requirements out there. So I have a small list. The honesty and the communication are so important. Now, Tracy's got an amazing resume. Tracy, how many inspections do you think you've done? Have you ever counted?
Oh, well, I started doing inspections with a guy named John Hall, and he's the one that actually started Total Home Inspection back in 1991. And things were a little bit different. I started working with him, I think, in 2003, 2004. We did 1,000 home inspections a year.
Wow.
We did four. It was a little bit, we did our business model was a little bit different, or John's business model was a little bit different back then. I was still learning, even though I was his partner. We did 4 every day, and that was on Saturdays too.
That's a ton of work.
There were days that we used to do 5, but things were a little bit different then. But reports were done on 3-part paper. John would sit in the kitchen and tell jokes and kind of do the report. I did all the work. But I think it's probably, I'd say around 8,000 to 10,000 maybe.
And that's like,
because I worked with John for like 7 years, and then on my own. I don't even get close to that now. I do maybe 250 a year now. I don't want to do as many. I don't, that was a volume type thing. And back then you could get away with it, but now that's not the kind of inspection I really want to do. I don't want to try to turn out a whole bunch of them in a day. And to tell you the truth, I've got about 20 years doing this, and I don't have to do volume. I mean, I'm maybe a little bit higher. I think my price is pretty much standard, but I'm just trying. I just want to put a quality product out there.
Well, the thing and the reason why that helps me as an agent, Amirali, is that because he does fewer, he allows time to talk to the client. So for me, that's invaluable. I mean, that's number one. So if you're going to go choose an inspector, or a stable of inspectors, make sure that they're going to be patient enough to explain everything to your client. I mean, it's very important, if possible, your client be there in person. If not, I put my long distance clients on the phone with Tracy. He'll walk around for sometimes hours explaining what
I don't do hours. Come on,
You have before. Don't sell yourself short. He doesn't. That wouldn't be a preference, but he's very patient with first-time home buyers, especially. It's important, because there's so much in the TREC, which is the Texas Real Estate Commission. They have requirements they have to meet, right, Tracy?
Absolutely.
In order the report has to cover certain things. And it looks scary when you see the report in person. So having
it really does a lot of times,
it's invaluable to have Tracy there to explain what's important and what's not.
Okay, so I'm a first-time home buyer. Let's pretend.
Okay.
And I have found, Linda, this, very confident, great real estate agent. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. And luckily she's holding my hand and going to lead me through it. So why do I want a home inspection? Well,
especially now, you're looking at, even if let's say I think the median price of a house now is about $340,000 or $388,000 in San Antonio. We got 6% interest rates. Every house is a $500,000 house, basically. It's the largest thing you'll ever buy in your life. The largest investment. At the very minimum, you need to have somebody to go through and just look at the house. In the old days, it was like your uncle, and he had like this big 6-foot level, and he put it on a few doors and walk around, flush the toilets, and pronounced it good. It's a little bit more complicated now. Especially now, a lot of especially younger people are looking at some of these older houses. I did one just yesterday. I'd say lady in her early 30s, late 20s, and she's looking at a 100-year-old house. And it's been redone, but there's a lot going into that, and you're just walking really into something blind.
So are you kind of like the mechanic when I want to buy a car and I take my car to a mechanic to look at it and tell me if there's anything, major wrong? Or
absolutely. Yeah. Well, the first thing I kind of look at really is you kind of break it down into, in my mind, I break things down in sections. Usually it's the three big things in a house are going to cost you money are going to be the roof, the foundation, and the air conditioning. When you start to get into other houses, like older houses, you can have things with drainage, the drain lines, shower pans, things like that can run you a lot of money. But those are kind of the three big ones. Other things you really look for is like stucco houses. You got to be real careful with those.
Plumbing,
any kind of water penetration issue is something you really got to look out for. And
plumbing and the sewer lines. Tracy has saved a client very recently, and this was where his experience really comes in handy. And I'll tell two stories about plumbing. Plumbing's like the scary unknown for realtors. when I go through, I try to anticipate things that we don't even, before we even get under contract,
Right.
so Tracy's taught me so much. Like I see an ITE box or a Federal Pacific electrical box. I'm like, whoa,
Yeah. Those are things you
we
gotta
got to
look
make
for.
sure that the seller is willing to replace those, right? Because they can combust, right? Well, the thing about Tracy is sometimes he uses his intuition. And it was like 2 or 3 years ago, we were at a house that was like a 1970s, late 70s house. And I want you to talk about the differences in plumbing, if you would, Tracy. But what he said was, there's no symptoms. There's nothing I can see wrong with the plumbing, but there's a big tree out in the front yard. And those roots may be affecting the sewer line. If I were you, I'd get a static test on this house. No,
Right.
and there was nothing in the report that indicated it.
Yeah.
My single, and I think she was a client of yours, Marilee, my single first time home buying mom, mother of 3, she couldn't afford it. So I spotted her the money for the static test and it failed hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we asked the seller to fix the sewer line.
That was the one inside the loop on 410, wasn't it? I remember the house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I asked them to fix the sewer. We asked them to fix it. The seller agreed. Well, 5 sewer breaks later, 5, and $25,000. That would have been devastating to my first-time home buyers. That's, for Tracy, that was just for me, that was great. So why is plumbing important, Tracy?
Well, just like, and then I'll bring another example of one we did this year. You did one that was over in Live Oak, and it was a nice little, it wasn't a very big house. And a lot of times I like to look at, a lot of people don't realize the smaller the house, hopefully the less likely you are to have problems, because there's just physically less things there, less bathrooms, less this, less that. And the house was looking really good, nice little house in Live Oak, but Live Oak's in that area where you got to worry about foundations. Anything on the northeast side, that's kind of where they're all at, or a lot, it's just more pronounced. It can be anywhere, but you really look for it there. We were in the garage, and the garage floor it looked a little higher. It's like, well, why would a garage floor be higher? There's cracks around it. Well, I said, well, there's probably a broken water line here, because what happens is that water will congregate there, and the soil will swell since it's clay soil, and it'll actually like a hydraulic jack and push up on the floor. And I was like, yeah, there's something going on with this, and you went and had that looked at, and sure enough, there was a leak underneath there. And these are just things that really you just see over time. It's kind of almost, it gets to the point where it's kind of like almost an instinct where you're at in town, what to look for. Sometimes I see a problem and I don't really know what it is, and I just stop and I just kind of look at it for a minute, look around, and it's kind of like a puzzle. You kind of put it together, and just through experience, you kind of learn, oh, this is what's going on. I remember one time I did a house in Northern Hills where they're notorious for bad foundation area. And I was parking my truck, and I just sat there and I looked at the house. I didn't know what I was looking at, but I sat there, and the roof had a new roof, but it was wrinkled on one side. And I looked at it, I was like, well, what could cause that? And I was like, oh, the foundation's lifting up. And sure enough, I went in there, and the first thing I did is I asked them, is there anything it was a kitchen side of the house. Is there anything going on with the kitchen here? And they're like, yeah, there was a water leak on this side. And it's the same thing. And it pushed up the house enough to where they had this new roof on there. And what it was is they had the leak, and something happened. They fixed the leak. I think they'd already fixed it, but they put the roof on, and then when they lifted it up, it wrinkled the roof. So it was like, and they're like, how did you know that? I was like, well, I just kind of put 2 and 2 together. I hadn't even walked in the house, and I saw that. So it's good when stuff like that happens, because they think you're like a miracle worker or something like that.
Well, you are,
it was just dumb luck that I just happened to look at it.
So you do WDI inspections too, and that's important for everybody to get a wood destroying inspection here. Not only termites, but borer beetles, carpenter ants, all that.
Right.
But so Tracy goes into is one house, and I am pretty good at I'm not an inspector, but I'm pretty good at picking up some of the things over the years. Diagonal cracks coming out of doorways and windows, that type of thing. Oh, and foundation, ghosting doors, that type of thing. But
right.
What's a ghosting door? Wait, what's a ghosting door? Never heard of that.
I used to write haunted door, but nobody knew what I was talking about. It's a door that, like, you open it and it shuts itself.
Oh,
kind of like slowly,
that's
you
cool.
know. And I used to write haunted doors, and then I'd get all these callbacks like, "What's a haunted door? What's the stat?" So now I usually kind of put like door out of square slash haunt or ghosted or haunted or whatever.
Ghosting,
I
yeah,
try to
yeah.
explain it to them what I mean before that, but yeah,
But that's so is so with the WDI, we can't, I mean, I know what, termite tunnels look like, or, if you've got the marching ants up the post in the front. But this one house, I thought, well, this house looks okay. So we got it under contract, and Tracy, I get there for the inspection. Tracy's like, I think we've got like a real problem with termites. And he had seen these tiniest little, and they were high up, and most of our termites are kind of like down near the ground.
yeah.
And
That's what they call swarm castles. That's where they're pushing out the new termites, the new queens, basically in the
so and
springtime usually.
tiny, I mean, these were just like, you might say, was just like a paint flaw. And he
Yeah,
found it. I mean, that was a total deal killer for us. I mean, there were
yeah,
other problems with that house, but
yeah.
that was like, to me, brilliant, because a lot of people would have just like, and he said, I almost passed it by, right, Tracy? And then,
It's easy to, yeah.
so,
You gotta, but I'm doing the termite inspection, the home inspection. I'm looking everywhere at the same time. So it's kind of like you're doing both at the same time. I will say the termites, I'm going to touch on that just a little bit. There's not as many, it seems like, as there used to be, because uh, I think these droughts we've been having have something to do with that. Also, there's a chemical called Termidor, and I used to do treatments. I'm too old and fat to do that now, and I don't have a heart attack dying because I'm doing termite treatment. It's 105 degrees outside. But Termidor is like a revolutionary termite treatment chemical, and it really does work. And the way it works is they ingest it's odorless, and they ingest it and they take it down to the colony, and it kills the queen. The subterranean termite, which is mostly what we have here, they have little colonies down in the ground, and they're continuously bringing food and water down to the queen and all that. Well, it gets into the colony and it just wipes out the whole colony. Well, I'm convinced that that's really kind of wiped out a lot of the termites in our area. Just, if it's
Great
plus for
news.
homeowners, but
Does it kill fire ants too?
yeah, it does a number on fire ant. Well, regular ants. I had some I sprayed around my house in my patio. I've got like a patio cover's got like a styrofoam type ceiling, and I noticed a few ants in there, and I sprayed it. And I remember I just did my patio, and I was gone for the weekend. I came home, and it's like, what's all this dirt on my patio? And I looked, and it was millions of ants that had been up and been nesting in there. And it was just like, oh my God. Yeah, it does a number, say, hey, I want Terminor done. Because there are cheaper chemicals. But it's just a good tip. I mean, if you put Terminor down, I don't think you'll probably really, if you put it down right, you'll probably never have another problem again.
And that, to that point, all the, Tracy can tell if it's ever been treated, because by law, they have to leave evidence of that, which is also helpful to know, because then, it's been treated. Yeah. You don't have to be concerned. And to piggyback on that, Tracy, you kind of like made a reference, which I wanted to highlight, is don't you find that it being, both a WDI inspector and a home inspector, building inspector, it makes you a better overall inspector, because there's some inspectors that only are licensed for building inspections, and then those only in license.
Well, it makes it easier for everybody, and I think it does. Well, it kind of shows that guys got more credentials. A guy, the more somebody knows, the better off you're going to be.
Yes, right, right.
Good point. Having said that, there's certain types of things, like I don't do mold inspections, things like that. When I see it, I call it out, but I choose not to go down that path. A lot of things are like mold, well inspections, septic inspections. I think that you should get companies that specialize in that. Mm-hmm. And I'd be skeptical of, I don't know. No, I should say skeptical, but I just don't think a normal home inspector could do as good a job as, say, like a company that makes a living doing that. That's just
that's a good point, because I've had I probably can count on, well, more than my fingers, right? How many times I've had a home inspector do a pool inspection, swimming pool inspection, and it actually, they don't know how to work it. And that's fair enough. There are a lot of different ways to work them. So I think getting a pool professional is probably the smart way to go.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because this year I've stopped doing pools officially.
Right.
And it's just getting to the point where I never liked doing them to begin with. I really don't like doing sprinklers either, but I mean, if you don't do sprinklers in San Antonio, you got to have some kind of level to where, you know, if 75% of all the houses have sprinklers, you're really going to limit yourself if you don't do sprinklers. So anyway, but pools, you know, they got saltwater pools now. It's all computerized, all this. And it's like, you know, I just don't want to dive into this. And
well, right. I've had not you, but I've had
yeah.
3 other inspectors break things on pools. And yesterday
that's another thing too. Yeah.
And that inspector broke something on the swimming pool, not a pool inspector, a regular inspector.
I don't want to be that guy.
Which brings me to this point, you know, for sellers, right? If sellers are watching this, you know, everyone, they always get, you know, kind of their hackles up about the inspector and all that. Well,
Sure.
So what are your professional responsibilities if you do accidentally break something? What happens?
Well, I mean, I tell you what happened to me this year. I was doing a home inspection, and a lady, I was opening up a window near a kitchen sink, and she had some plants or something there, and she had this little tiny plant about this big, and it fell down. I tried to grab it, it hit the sink, and it broke the little pot it was in. Well, you know, her daughter, you know, went to South Africa and bought this pot or something. I mean, I don't know. It cost me like $100 for this little potted plant. And I left, actually, I broke it, you know, and so I took my business card and I wrote my name on it, and I think I left a $20 bill there, you know, and I tried to call her, the selling agent, say, hey, I broke this lace plant. And actually, we were running a little bit late on the house, and she was actually waiting outside to come back home. And you know, you can always tell the owner that when they're waiting or whatever. So I went up and said, hi, I'm the inspector, and you had a little potted plant there, and I dropped it in the sink and this and that. And she was really upset about it. And I was like, well, I left some money there, and if there's a problem, call me back. Well, her husband called me back that night. Long story short, he wound up paying like $100. And I was kind of, I thought, well, whatever. But you know, her daughter bought it for her and all that. What are you going to do? You know. But yeah, if you go in there and you break something, I mean, you're liable for it. That's the way I look at it. I try to be as careful as you can. But I mean, you're gonna break a potted plant once a year if you do enough home inspections.
Yeah, well, like anything else,
you can't help it. You know, it's just
that's
real hard.
That's so courteous, though, to reach out to the seller without, you know, normally what happens is we find out afterwards, and then I'm calling the inspector.
It doesn't do any good to do that, you know. That's why, another reason why I like to talk to people a lot is it's kind of a selfish reason. I don't want a bunch of phone calls when I'm done. I mean, I want to go there and do a good job and make sure. My job is to make sure that they know as much about the house as what what I've seen. You know, I need to communicate all the things that I've seen in the house and let them know so they can make an informed opinion. I don't work for Linda. Like Linda, she's a good friend of mine, but I work for your buyers.
Right.
And one thing I do like working for Linda is I don't get any like, well, I really need this sale, or what do you mean this is that, or and all that. And to tell you the truth, I really don't advertise a whole lot. I have people that use me throughout the years, and realtors that have kind of twist your arm, kind of like that. They don't use me, or they fall by the wayside, or things like that. Generally, people like that, they're not going to last anyway.
Right. Well, I want you to say, like, what was it? I mean, like, how many times in the last 3 months have you told me, like, in the middle of an inspection, actually, I stopped you because you were like this. I'm like, hold on, Tracy.
Yeah.
Now, would you let your daughter buy this house? And he just looked up and he goes, I hate this house. It's awful. And so my client just looked at him and said, okay, you don't have to say anymore. We're going to cancel the contract.
Well, it's not my job to pick and choose what house. I mean, there's some people ask me, it's like, would you buy this house? I was like, no. I was like, why not? It says, because I'm 56 years old. I live in a little house. I was going to buy another house. I don't want to have to do any work on it. I mean, it may be a really nice house. So when I was 30 years old, I would probably buy it or whatever. I mean, there's lots of different reasons people buy houses in different areas. They got a school they want their kid to go to. It's close to mom and dad. It's close to work. They want to be downtown, and that's their scene or whatever. There's people got a whole lot of different reasons, but yeah, and I'm not there to say, hey, do or don't buy it, but I will, if a house is really bad and things are just stacking up and this and that, it's like, especially younger people, I'm like, man, you need to be real careful with this because you've got this. What happens if this breaks? Then this could happen, and I think, in my personal opinion, I think that's kind of part of it. I just,
Well, I mean,
on a human level,
you care about your clients. They're not,
yeah,
I'm not your client, they're your client, and
exactly.
you care about
Yeah.
them, that they're going to not make
And another thing I tell people, this has been in my life, is, things happen for a reason, and I also tell, it's like, man, if a deal's not going through and things like it seems like there's road barriers everywhere, go find another house.
Yes, not meant to be.
Yeah, you shouldn't have to work that hard to buy a house. I mean, it's not something you can just do in one day. We all know that. But if there's just thing after thing after thing, and it's just like we're not getting anywhere, and the more we bury, the more issues there are. It's like, you get to the point to where, and that's where we kind of come in,
Right.
Another thing I will say too, this has been since I've been doing this, is, well, realtors shouldn't do inspectors, this and that, and it's the relationship's supposed to be different. I just personally, on my, I don't know, maybe get in trouble saying this, but who knows, like, if I was going to buy something, how many times are you going to get a home inspector in your life? Once or twice? I mean, you got to kind of rely on the realtors a little bit to help you, to kind of like, well, this is a pretty good guy, this is a bad guy, this and that.
Well, I think it's really important that, like I said, the communication piece. And I recently had to have, because the inspector that my client chose, who does a good report, but he doesn't explain things. I had to have Tracy come in and explain explain a report to someone.
That was on Father's Day. No, that was on Mother's Day.
He came Mother's Day. Yeah. And so, but that's the piece that I think is the most important because everyone, if all you do is see that scary report that Texas, makes you put out this very detailed, and if without explanation and without any perspective given, it is scary. I mean, most people don't even, like, I even have electrical engineers who go, well, I'm an electrical engineer, but I don't do home electrical. I don't know what that means. So for having that, this is what's important, and this is what this means, and purely giving perspective is, to me, invaluable, because then they're making an informed decision, So what is the worst, like, what's your best war story from home?
Oh, the best war story. Oh, I remember this lady. She was a nurse, and she'd had a problem with a boyfriend following her or something like that, and she was trying to get out of town. And first house I did for her was way out, like in Bandera. And it was some trailer or something. It was bad. I mean, it was real bad. And it was funny because the realtor did it. He doesn't live here anymore. It was in Woodlands. And I know Mike Cruz. I've known him for years. Really nice guy. Good man. And he's one of the few realtors, kind of like you, Linda, that was very knowledgeable about houses. He'd flipped them and stuff like that and fixed them up. So we went, that was a bust. So we found this other house that was on like 1604, like south of town, on the loop, kind of like over where Toyota is and all that. And it was the guy had built this house himself.
Ooh.
And it was just all kinds of wrong. And there wasn't any codes that were followed. It was the guy just built a house out of pocket, basically, is what we called it. So I went outside, and they had a closet where there was a hot water heater. It was a gas hot water heater inside of a closet that had no vent. So the inside of it was black from about shoulder up from the carbon monoxide that had got in there. I sat there, just another thing. I sat there and looked at it, and I couldn't. I said, something's wrong here. And I looked at it, they had PVC pipe for the gas line.
Oh, no.
That ran on top of the hot water heater. It was like this far away from where the where the
Oh,
yeah, and then right next to it was this electrical panel box, and it looked like a freaking bird nest. I mean, it was so horrible. And I was like, I couldn't believe what I was looking at. I really, it was that's the absolute worst thing I think I've ever, or most dangerous thing I've seen. And I called Mike over there and the lady that was buying the house, and I said, I want to show you guys something. I opened up this door, and I looked in that closet, and I pointed out what I'd seen, and there, everybody's eyes got like that big around. I said, you have no idea how much danger we're in just standing here looking at this.
wow.
And that was one of the times where I told her, I was like, look, I basically stopped the inspection right there. And I told her, I was like, hey, this is not safe to buy. This is, I'm not, I don't even want it was so bad. I didn't even want my name on the report.
Oh,
Like I didn't even want to do a report,
Wow.
And I told Mike that, I says, this is nothing personal. It's, sometimes you got to make in my opinion, it's a business decision that, with something that unsafe, it's just like, man, we just need to back away.
I hope she canceled the
And
contract.
they're like, oh yeah, this is not what we wanted to. And I think she maybe gave me $100 or something a week. And I said, hey, go find you another house, and I'd be happy to look at it.
And we're down to
maybe some guys don't do that, but that's the kind of way I like to do it.
We're down to our last minute. I just want to ask, do you do new builds, new home construction?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's
And that
real
can be
important.
more important than you think nowadays.
Yeah, that's what I'm guessing too. I hear a lot of people skipping that. Tracy, we're so happy to have you here. We're going to put contact information. You can always find Linda and I on truetexas.com. All the information will be there. And thanks, Tracy. Thanks, Linda. This is great. We've enjoyed our time with you. We need to have you back. We want to hear more funny stories.
Oh, yeah. He's
man,
just getting started.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks so much.
Okay.
Till next
for having
time.
Bye.
Bye.